I think we've all been lied to. Not intentionally, but somewhere along the way we've started believing that the exciting part of life is the part everyone really gets to see. The finished product, or the I finally made it moment. And while this can be true in one way or another, that's not exactly where life happens. Okay, so think about it this way. Think about building a house. Nobody really drives past a construction site and gets excited about the foundation. I mean, unless your job is something in that respect. Nobody really takes pictures of like wet concrete. Nobody posts rebar on Instagram and is like, oh my gosh, look how cool this is. No, that's not really how things work. Everyone waits until at least the walls are up or the windows are in, the kitchen sink is finished, the furniture is inside, the decor, the lighting, etc., etc. That is the part that everybody notices. That's the part where everyone celebrates. But here's the thing, none of that would actually exist if someone hadn't spent weeks building something that no one is ever really supposed to see, that being the basement. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized life works exactly the same way. Now hang on, before you leave me and check out and leave the video, let me explain. We spend so much time admiring other people's houses that we forget they spent ages pouring concrete underground. The part that nobody clapped for and nobody complimented or even noticed. I've related this a lot to YouTube lately because people might watch one of my Minecraft videos and think, oh wow, that video turned out really good, or your videos are so good, or something like that. And from the bottom of my heart, I am incredibly grateful for that, truly. But what they don't see, and bear with me for a sec because this can be a lot, is the dozens of takes that never made it into the video. The cutout mistakes of me talking them out, the hours of figuring out what the idea of the video is, or the concept is, or the hours trying to figure out why Replay Mod decided to break again. The nights where I spent way longer editing than I ever thought I would, or allow myself to, or recording something and deleting it, and recording again, and deleting it, or changing the thumbnail and changing that again, learning how to tell a story, learning how to talk, or how to be comfortable hearing my own voice coming back to me, learning how to make something that actually feels like me, but also something that all of you guys also enjoy. None of this is glamorous and none of it's exciting, but honestly, it's mostly just pretty boring. But that's the basement. That's the part that quietly holds everything else up that you guys see. And I don't think this just applies to YouTube. I think it also applies to almost everything. Things like relationships or friendships, sports, music, business, school, whatever it is, right? Learning how to communicate, how to trust yourself. Every single thing that's worth building starts underground. You don't see the confidence being built, and you don't see discipline being built or patience or character. You just see the person years later after everything has been built. You see that person standing inside the house that everyone wishes that they had. And I think that's why so many people can get discouraged, because we're comparing someone else's finished house to the hole we're currently digging. But of course, it still doesn't look impressive, and it's not supposed to. It's still becoming the thing that's going to support everything else along the way and along our journey. And I think that's why we can find ourselves quitting so often, because nobody told us that building that basement is supposed to look unfinished. We're not necessarily incapable or untalented, and we didn't choose the wrong dream. It's just all supposed to look messy, and it's all supposed to kind of feel slow sometimes. It's all supposed to feel repetitive, because if you stop pouring the concrete halfway through, you're never going to build the house. And I think that's where a lot of us are. We're standing in the hole, looking up at someone else's roof, wondering why our life doesn't look like theirs yet, without realizing that they're just further along building their foundation than we are. And that's the crazy part. I don't even think that the basement is actually the goal. I think that the basement is simply what allows everything else to exist. It's kind of the quiet part and the invisible part that I mentioned earlier, the work that changes you before your circumstances. So after thinking of all of this, it kind of got me also thinking about practice. Sometimes I feel like we don't really understand what practice necessarily is, and it could be looked at as just repeating something until you get good at it. But I think it's something a little bit more deep than that. So I started to learn more about this idea, and I realized I may have been looking at the idea of practice completely wrong. So let's talk about that. When I started reading more about this idea, there was this one idea that would not leave my head, and I just kept coming back to it over and over again. It was the idea that when we first learn something, everything feels super, super awkward, and you have to think about every little step and every choice that you do. Everything feels intentional, and almost nothing feels natural. It's kind of like with dancers. At first, they are having to count out every single beat. They're thinking about where their feet go, what your arms are doing, what your feet are doing, what your legs are doing, hands, face, all of that at once, trying to remember what comes next and also trying not to mess up. Thinking so hard that it's hard not to forget to enjoy the dancing. But then something strange starts to actually happen. Over time, they decide to keep showing up, to keep practicing, and keep repeating the same fundamentals over and over again. And it's because they're important, not because they're exciting, but one day, without even realizing it, they automatically just stop thinking about where their feet go and where all of those things go and what they're doing. They just dance. The one thing that used to take all of the attention has quietly become a part of who they actually are, and I think that is one of the coolest things about also being human. Our brains are consistently taking things that feel impossible and turning them into habits. That's why when driving a car for the first little while feels terrifying. But now you can get home and you don't even remember half the drive. And no, not because you weren't paying attention, but because your brain has already built the basement. It's already poured the concrete. It already knows where everything belongs. But then I also realized something after this. Maybe that is why we get so frustrated so quickly, because we mistake thinking for failing, when really, thinking is proof that we are learning. If we're having to think about something really hard, it probably just means that it's new. Not because you're bad at it, it's just new. And I wish so bad that someone had told me this years ago, because I cannot tell you how many times I have sat in front of my computer editing a video thinking, why is this taking me so friggin' long? Or trying to record something like I mentioned earlier and deleting it, trying again, deleting it, trying again, just over and over again, right? Wondering if I was making things harder than they needed to be. But now I can look back a little bit and realize that those things weren't signs that I was failing. Those were signs I was building. And here's the funny part, is just when something finally becomes easy, life has to throw a curveball at us and introduce something new. Like, great, congrats, here's another new skill, another challenge, another level, and then suddenly you're thinking again. Yay. So for a while, it almost feels like you have gone backwards. Kind of like the saying, one step forward, two steps backwards. And it's almost like you've forgotten everything. But you haven't. You've just started building another floor. Your basement is still there, and your foundation is still there. You're just learning something that hasn't become a part of you yet. During this process, it is so easy to feel like we've made mistakes, that we can't do it. Or that because we messed up, that it's evidence to stop. When really, that is exactly what the beginning is actually supposed to feel like. You're not gonna start reading a book expecting to know and understand everything inside. I heard a quote from Michael Johnson that I absolutely love and live to by this day. It says, "We don't practice for perfection. We practice so that in the face of adversity, we can overcome all odds." And if you're interested, he does have a YouTube channel named The 42 Podcast, linked below for easy access, again, if you're interested. But this changes the way that I have looked at practice, because the point was never perfection. The point of practice is simply preparing us for moments when life gets difficult, when we don't have things going according to plan, when the fear shows up or the doubt creeps in, when we don't feel like continuing, when we don't feel like we can keep going. Practicing isn't just teaching us a skill, it's teaching us who we become when things get hard. It's teaching us who we become when things get hard. And honestly, I think that is a much bigger lesson, because eventually the skill becomes automatic, like I have been trying to explain. But the character you've built getting there stays with you forever, which led me to another realization that mastery was never about reaching the top. It's actually about becoming a kind of person who never stops climbing. And that's where the fun begins. It's this idea that maybe the goal was never actually the house. And okay, hear me out for a second. Just hear me out. Like, I've touched on this in the past, and I think that we have spent so much of our lives believing that eventually we're going to in quotes, arrive. That one day we're going to make it and we're finally going to get there. We're finally going to know enough, to be confident enough, to be ready enough, feel ready enough, have everything figured out, for everything to just be enough, right? But what if that day actually never comes? And I don't mean this in a depressing way at all. I just think that it's one of the most freeing realizations that I've had in a little while, because if the house is never really finished, then you're not behind. You're just building. You're always building. And no matter what is happening, you're just always building. So think about it. Someone builds a house and a few years later, they may repaint a room or renovate the kitchen. They might finish the basement, or maybe they built a new deck, or maybe they just don't like the flooring anymore and they change it. Like, the house just keeps changing because people inside keep changing, and life isn't asking us to become one version of ourselves forever. It's inviting us to keep becoming and keep changing, and I love that because it means that you're allowed to change your mind, and you're allowed to change and grow and have different experiences and different thoughts and beliefs, and you're allowed to change your mind. And sure, it's always easier said than done. It's easier to teach than live, but you're always allowed to outgrow things. You're allowed to look back and realize there's a version of me that got me here, but it doesn't mean that that version is supposed to take me to where I'm going. And that's okay. Actually, I think it is necessary. I also came across this other idea that made me stop to think once more, and it talked about knowing when to say goodbye. And to me, this has been a very personal thing for my brain to try to comprehend and wrap my head around. And no, not because saying goodbye or knowing when to say goodbye is something that is necessarily bad, or that someone failed you, or whatever it is, right? But because you've simply just grown as much as you were meant to in that season of your life. And I don't think that this is really talked about enough, at least not in a common way. Because sometimes we hold on to things way longer than we're supposed to. Yes, we're supposed to feel, yes, we're supposed to roll with the punches and everything like that, but we can find ourselves holding on to something again longer than we need to, whether that be a job or a habit, a friendship, or a way of thinking, or an old version of ourselves, right? Because it's familiar, and familiar feels safe. But here's something else. Every time we spend our time, we are making a statement about what we value. And in turn, every time we spend our money, we are making a statement again about what we value. Every, in quotes, yes, and every, in quotes, no, every decision, little by little, we are building something. And it's pouring another little bit of concrete into the foundation of who we're becoming. And I really don't know, but that just kind of made me stop and look at my own life a little bit more. And I encourage you to do the same, because it's really so easy to say that we value something. But it's another thing to actually look at where our time goes, where our attention goes, and our energy goes, because that's usually where the truth is. And it's like the idea many of us have seen online. It's where if a stranger were to look at you and look at what you do, your habits, your routines, without knowing what you are thinking about or without hearing your thoughts, what would they say your goals and priorities are? Anyway, then there's also that one more thought that I just couldn't shake. Maybe learning isn't always about learning. What if it's actually about remembering? And I know that sounds weird, but think about it. Have you ever heard someone say something and instead of feeling like you learned something new, it just felt like oh, I already knew that. You just hadn't thought about it in years, or I haven't been able to put it into words before. Almost like someone just reminded you of something that has always been there. And I honestly think life is full of moments like that. We're just remembering different pieces of who we've always been, and we're remembering how to trust ourselves. We're remembering how to slow down, how to create and forgive, and how to have fun again, and be curious again. How to, most importantly, be ourselves again. And that could be why certain things and certain ideas hit us so deeply, because they wake up something that has been quietly waiting underneath the surface for so long. So maybe that's what building the basement really is. It's not about just building skills or just building habits or building discipline, per se. It's about building the foundation that is strong enough to support every new version of you that hasn't shown up yet. Because here's the thing. I don't think that mastery is something you achieve just one random Tuesday night and then you're done forever. No. My thought is that mastery is waking up and looking at whatever's in front of you and deciding that I am willing to keep building, even if nobody else sees it, even if it is slow, and even if I have to, say, start thinking again. even if I have to learn something completely new, because every new floor still stands on that same foundation. That said, what if we didn't spend so much time about worrying how quickly our house is going up, but in turn, spending a little more time making sure that the basement that we're building is strong enough to hold everything that we're dreaming about? That life everyone admires that's been built on years of invisible work, because one day people will walk through your life, admire the house that you have built, and they'll never realize that the strongest part of it was the part nobody ever saw. If you have made it to the end of this video, please click on this video, as you will probably end up liking it even more than this one, and check the description below for the 42 podcast. I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone!